life is complex.
So is our mental health. It cannot be understood by diagnosis alone.
Our philosophy is treat the person, not the mental illness. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Humanizing Mental Health. I'm Trent Akers.
And I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
Yeah. And today we have another special guest with us, don't we, Jeremy?
Yes. So we have an author, professor, and musician that has joined us today, Ernestine Whitman, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So I'll give a bit of an introduction. So Ernestine has written the book Counter Melodies, which is a story about your struggles, your process of experiencing trauma, and then also the recovery that comes through your life, which is beautiful.
Thank you.
So giving a little bit of a broader introduction. So Ernestine Whitman began her career as a professional flutist at age 20, making her the youngest member of the Atlanta Symphony. Her passion for teaching brought her to St. Lawrence University, where she was a professor of flute for 33 years. A passionate advocate for restorative justice, she volunteers frequently in programs at several of the Wisconsin prisons.
Okay. Wow. As I overhear that, I'm hearing, like a lot of things that at first blush may be a little bit contradictory.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And I think the ages at which I did many of those things is striking, because I started playing professionally when I was 20, which was rather young. But I didn't start, I don't even know if it mentions martial arts. I did not start martial arts till I was in my 60s.
Wow.
Wow.
And got 2 black belts.
Wow.
So then towards the end of that, I switched to writing and took a beginning memoir course. The prison work, which became so important to me, I started right after I retired. And I did not know, I tried, I don't know, maybe 8 different volunteer activities. And the one that really spoke most deeply to me was the prison work. So we will probably get into that later because it's very connected to the rape.
Okay. Yeah. So with that in mind, because you've kind of given us an overview of your varied life and your story, where would you like to start?
Well, I thought I would start. Here's what the book looks like.
Okay. Thank you.
I thought I would start describing a little bit about my family of origin, because kind of at the root of all the traumas that I experienced is my need for male attention, male approval in particular. And that goes back to my family of origin. Small family, 2 daughters. My older sister, 4 years older, was brilliant. Actually, she still is. And as I got older, especially once I started piano, there were comparisons inevitably between us, because our piano was in the center of a small house. So on the weekends, when my father heard us both practicing, he would sometimes compare us. So I'll jump in to a section where he has just walked by while I was practicing. "You've got a long way to go if you ever want to catch up to Melinda," Daddy said with a chuckle one day. He had heard me struggling with a run, trying to get it as fast as Melinda played. Whenever Daddy compared me to Melinda, piano comments bothered me the most, because he showed little interest in music other than to contrast our achievements. Excuse me. I was second best in everything, not just piano. Melinda set impossibly high standards, both socially and academically. When she was in the 7th grade, 4 boys each gave her a box of Valentine candy. Maybe it's your auburn curls those boys like so much, Daddy said, making me wonder if any boy would ever like my straight, lank hair. At 12, Melinda was already the pretty teenager she would become. In the 3rd grade, my Buster Brown haircut accentuated a too round face, and my new front teeth looked like they belonged to a giant beaver. Melinda's academic record was equally intimidating, not simply A's, but perfect scores on most of her tests. In both junior high and high school, my sister and I had some of the same teachers. And when they called me Melinda, I might have taken it as a compliment. She was, after all, an extraordinary student. Instead, I felt erased, not merely in my sister's shadow, but obliterated by it. As the burden of comparison increased, however, I stumbled upon an escape route. So that was the end of the 2nd chapter. And the 3rd chapter just describes starting the flute. And I started when I was age 11. And here, just in a brief passage, right away, I felt a personal connection with the flute, in sharp contrast to my adversarial struggle with the piano. Instead of hitting keys, I made the sound with my breath. That felt magical, as if my breath transformed the flute into an extension of my body. And unlike piano, it was portable. With the music stand squeezed into my bedroom, I had to angle the flute carefully to avoid hitting the walls, but it was worth it to practice away from my father's critical presence. And then I go on for a bit. So I began flute lessons in junior high just because a friend of mine suggested it. It was not that passion of, oh, I heard Peter and the Wolf and I wanted to be the bird who is the flute.
Mhm.
No, it was one of those lucky, whimsical decisions that was based on the fact that my friend was very popular and she was doing it. So I did it. So maybe I could worm my way into the
Mhm.
popular group.
I got a
Uh,
little bit of a reflection, if it's all right, if I tie in
Mm.
here,
sure.
and that is one of the things that often people don't understand, and that is they don't really understand trauma. They think that trauma is being shot at or in an accident, and all those things are traumatic.
Mhm.
Don't get me wrong; they're traumatic. Those are what they call big T trauma. But of course, there's also small T trauma, which a lot of people don't understand. It's this erosion underneath of us of who we are, and often we want to be careful. This isn't about blame; it's just about understanding. I am absolutely certain that if your dad understood what he was doing to you, then he wouldn't have done it. Now, that isn't to say that somehow he's off the hook either. It's just
Right.
about what you're describing isn't about blaming anybody. It's actually just about understanding how did I develop.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people out there, if they could hear that message of what you're saying, that is, I had these small T traumas that actually made me more vulnerable into the future. Am I capturing that right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's that death by a thousand cuts.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
something that's ongoing and no one example, like comparing me to my sister in terms of my piano skill, that's very minor, but it was so present for so many years.
Hmm.
And what you said about robbing, um, sort of eroding your sense of who you are, I
Hmm.
remember being a very happy little girl.
Hmm.
And it seemed like the turning point was when I started piano, and my father, who was always great with little kids, but less interested the older you got, excuse me,
Mm.
um, So he started comparing us, and that happened to coincide with me being in junior high, which is sort of a vulnerable age anyway.
Fundamentally, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally vulnerable.
Yeah. Like as you, well, as the both of you were talking there, I couldn't help but think like whenever I go back with clients and I'll take a developmental history from them, and it's really about your father was supposed to be your safe attachment figure, the person where you would go to for this. So really it was having as I was hearing you talk, it was almost like a counterintuitive relationship where this is somebody that's supposed to help you process this, but he's really not a safe place for you to land, to be human, to be vulnerable.
Right. And I think one really important piece is that my father was a professor of economics.
Mm,
Mm,
And in our family, one thing counted, and that was academic achievement,
mm,
almost to the exclusion of anything else. So I think it was part of who he was, that achievement, being the best at something, that was so important to him. And to Jeremy's point, I don't think he meant to intimidate me or dismiss me. It's just that he was so anxious that we be perfect, that we achieve. And I just had the misfortune of being 4 years behind someone who was brilliant. So, yeah, and it's very good point that these things erode over time, and that the person, maybe call him the perpetrator, is unaware of the damage
mm,
that he's doing.
mm. Yeah. And
mm.
like as you bring that up too, like I almost wonder, like in the parlance of internal family systems, that's where we would almost talk about legacy burdens in the sense that I could almost hear for your father, he was almost imparting on you and your sister the same burden that
Uh-oh,
he,
you frozen.
Oh,
oh,
we can still hear you.
okay,
Oh,
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So,
yes.
we can still
It
hear
just back
the,
up.
yeah.
Back
Yeah,
up just a little bit.
yeah.
okay, okay. So, like what I was saying, in like in the language of internal family systems, we talk a lot about what's called legacy burdens, whereas when family members will unknowingly kind of gift feelings or traumas or other things to their family members in those actions. And I can kind of hear when your father was interacting with you because he had that feeling of anxiety and needing to measure up that was probably within him. He was doing the same with you and your sister.
That's very perceptive because, for one thing, my father was a very anxious man. And looking one generation back, he was the youngest of 9 siblings. And
Mm,
there was a boy and then 7 older sisters, and then him. And this was back in the 20s and 30s, and all of these um, children, except one, went to college. And for that era, that was pretty exceptional. And of course,
mhm.
my father, being the youngest, may have sort of just predisposed him to be wanting to impress and catch up and make up for not being in the same way that I felt with my sister.
Yeah, for sure. Interestingly enough, it led him to success, and so maybe he saw it as functional, but it wasn't something that was functional for you. Hmm.
Well, the fact that he was successful was fine.
Hmm.
I think it was the fact that he couldn't ever relax. He couldn't
Yep.
get
Mhm.
Totally.
past his anxiety.
Yeah, totally.
And um, once I did choose music, that really triggered his anxiety about me being a financial burden to him.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was, he was worried that I put him up for this. We grew up in the South, but it was never find the right man and get married, which I'm very grateful for. But it
Mhm.
was, boy, you better. make a living, and you better get off my payroll.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I see that. And you're entirely right. He probably saw how well it brought him to success. He didn't see the cost. In other
Right.
words, he knew how to act. He knew how to be financially successful, but he didn't know how to manage the inside process that he
Hmm.
experienced.
No, he was not emotionally aware.
Yeah,
Let's put
for
it
sure.
that way.
So interesting. You talk about this framework that your life is built upon, and I think it's very important for us to know that because it sets a trajectory for us. Um, what's the next phase? You were talking about junior high and fascinated on where this narrative
Hmm.
is going.
Hmm.
Well, okay, so for 2 years, I thought band was fun.
Yeah,
Um, when I was 13, my friend who got me into this, Anne, and I, like everyone our age, entered a 5 year high school. So we were lowly sub freshmen. And she and I had had the typical junior high crushes on our junior high band director, who happened to be very cute and very good band director, really comfortable with kids.
Hmm.
So when Anne and I went to our first band rehearsal in this 5 year high school, um, we abruptly faced the contrast between our, as we said in those days, dreamboat, and this really awkward man who was the band director. So it turned out that that is the man who became my flute teacher. But if I might just read a little bit
yeah,
to
Sure.
give the listeners a sense of at least what he looked like on my first encounter in the band room.
Mm-hmm.
Anne and I mourned the loss of Mr. Barron, the junior high band director. We had traded our cute idol for a strange man named Mr. Little. Oddly, Mr. Little was big, tall and overweight, with a large round face and straight black hair swept back from his high forehead. His rimless glasses and ill fitting brown suit did nothing to enhance the awkward appearance. In striking contrast to Mr. Barron, Mr. Little seemed ill at ease with the band. His face registered two expressions: irritated and bored. Our junior high crushes certainly did not transfer to this weird man. And then fast forward to um, Mr. Barron had told my mother that I was pretty talented and that my flute talent would develop better if I studied with a private teacher. And Mr. Barron recommended the principal flutist in the Atlanta Symphony, who was reputedly not only the best flutist in the South, in Atlanta, but in the South. So I'm in the car with my
Yeah.
mother. Yeah, I'm in the car with my mother going to this first lesson, and the only open slot was 8 a.m. on Saturday. So I was really sulking. I did not want to be up at that hour.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Uh, whoops.
and you would have been about how old at this point in time? 13, did you say?
Yes,
Hmm.
13. Exactly.
Mm.
Okay. So when we got to the teacher's house, my mother turned to me. You should probably know this man's name. It's Mr. Little. Mother, for Pete's sake, I said, almost yelling. That's the weird band director. Why didn't you tell me? I don't want to take lessons with him. Why can't I study with Mr. Barron? Well, for one thing, he's not a flutist. You know that. But but he could still teach me a lot. Mr. Barron recommended Mr. Little. He's even playing professionally. Just take one lesson and then we can talk about it. As I climbed the steps to the front door of Mr. Little's house, I thought how embarrassing it would be if my friends found out I was studying with the uncool band director. Reluctantly, I rang the doorbell. When he appeared, framed in the doorway, Mr. Little seemed twice as tall and far more imposing than he'd seemed in the band room. I felt a little nervous. And then I go on to talk about uh, what is house was like, small house. Um, so, did you bring something to play? He asked. Yes, I said, putting my book of solos on the music stand. I turned to the fast movement of a Handel sonata. Very good, he said after I finished. I turned to face him and was astonished to see a big smile on his face, a genuine smile that made his eyes crinkle up. The awkward band director had completely disappeared, replaced by someone who radiated warmth and reassurance. Despite my previous opinion of him, I wanted to crawl inside the warmth of his remarkable smile. So, how about some sight reading? Mr. Little asked. Sure. I wanted to impress him with my sight reading ability, but it was hard to focus because I'd never heard such a lovely flute sound. I had heard only fellow band members, and I had no idea that a flute tone could be beautiful. Mr. Little's sound had none of the fuzzy white noise that plagued most band directors, and it was fuller even when he played softly, as if it was composed of lots of colors. When we stopped, I almost blurted out, "Wow!" But the important part of that passage, which obviously comes out a lot more as I proceed to study with him for the next 5 years, is what a terrific teacher he was, how charismatic and kind. There was nothing inappropriate about his relationships with his students. He was just a fine teacher, and for me, sort of a life raft
Mhm.
because he gave me the attention that I never had gotten from my father
Mhm.
and something my father was never able to express, which is interest in my achievements and pride in what I had accomplished. So it was almost the perfect setup for me to become very dependent on this man's support.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, it struck me that it sounds like when you first almost describe him, it almost sounds like initially that he almost seemed like your father right off the bat, like very judgmental, and it's almost kind of like that hook. And then as he warmed up, it's like, ooh, you're giving me everything that I've never gotten, and now I almost want and almost crave more of that because I'm needing that secure attachment figure. And I can't really judge, like, is this genuine warmth or is this a warmth with something else behind it?
And it seems like at that point in time, you didn't see any, or there didn't appear to be any kind of uh, agenda from him.
I don't think there was. I think
Mhm.
he truly was a gifted teacher
Mhm.
interested in his students. The
Mm,
problem that I had with him later had really nothing to do with his devotion to teaching and his integrity.
Mhm.
So,
mhm.
as a teacher, he was terrific. And because he was terrific, and I obviously adored him, my father really began to denigrate Mr. Little. So there I
Mm,
was kind of caught between um,
interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you know, I think sometimes that sometimes this can actually be quite common with some parents, like when they see their child sort of looking up to another human being, because it's almost like that calls into question. Well, wait, you're
Yeah.
mine.
Attachment competition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And I would almost wonder there too, you know, how much that almost called into almost his feelings of anxiety, all those things that were maybe in the
Mhm.
background for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can't help but think he belittled Mr. Little.
True,
very
true.
good,
Yeah, yeah.
very
Yeah.
good.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely, he did. When the passage which I thought about reading, but I think it's better that I just describe it.
Mhm.
A turning point in my interest in the flute came at the end of my sophomore year when Mr. Little recommended that I audition for a very competitive scholarship that would be free tuition, room and board at an 8 to 9 week program at Brevard Music Center for the summer. And I was so honored that Mr. Little thought I was good enough to audition. And it was very competitive because it was open to all woodwind and brass players. So it wasn't just flutists. Um, but the reaction when I won it was so telling because as soon as I got home, I called Mr. Little and he was very warm and very appreciative and congratulated me, quite remarkable at your age, especially. And then a few hours later, I told my father, "Oh, well, I guess that's good. What is it exactly?" And his mind went first, and he did say a few sentences later, "What are the hidden costs here?" And then he said, "Well, you better find out because I'd hate for you to get your hopes up and then not be able to do it because Mr. Little didn't bother to tell you about the hidden costs." So, just sort of
Mm.
to each other was the warm response from my flute teacher and the lack of interest and even denigration from my father, who
Mhm.
he couldn't care less. And yet it was really an honor to win a statewide competition, but
Hmm.
didn't, didn't impress him.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can almost hear for you, like as that, like I think for a lot of kids, it can almost kind of be, that sort of searching behavior is like, well, what do I need to do to impress you then?
Yeah.
That is spot on. Because in the scene, when I talk about the dialogue, um, I say, well, I know that the tuition is covered. And then I add that it's an 8 or 9 week program. And I'm thinking maybe the length of the program will impress him, that it's not
Mm.
just a 1 week thing. And so you're right on. I remember thinking, well, maybe this will impress him. Oh, well, maybe this will impress him. And it never, well, it was that message, never good enough. That was
Mhm.
just
Hmm.
sort of the mantra of my relationship with my
Yeah.
father. And it's very hard not to internalize that when you hear it for years.
Totally. Totally.
Absolutely.
Ernestine, another thing that jumps out at me is the name of your book is Counter Melodies. And I wonder in your youth and as you begin to experience this in your teen years, how much you actually had counter will that was against your dad. That's like, oh, well, you know what? I don't care what you think anymore. I'm going to do whatever I want. If you're saying don't go into music, it's just more likely that I'm going to do that anyway, just to spite you.
I wish that that had been true. I wish I'd been that kind of spunky girl. But
Mm.
I didn't feel that way.
Mm,
It was for me, it was a passion that developed over time because I had a very good teacher
mm,
and
mhm,
because I was so interested since I got male approval from playing the flute.
that makes
But
sense.
I don't remember wanting to thwart my father. I think I
Mhm,
always wanted to please him.
mm,
And
mhm.
uh, even when I made the decision, when I told him that I wanted to be a music major, and I made a big mistake. I said, "Well, Mr. Little thinks that I'd have a
Oh,
chance." And he just
yeah.
jumped in and said, "What does Mr. Little know about economics? Do you think I don't know anything about economics?"
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so it was pretty blatant that
Yeah.
um, and I don't think it was because I was rebelling against him. I
Yeah.
think it was a genuine
Yeah.
passion,
Yeah.
first for
Hmm.
the flute and then for orchestral music.
Yeah.
And
Must have been
what
terrifying for
crucial
you then.
the crucial thing was
Yeah.
that it was something my sister had not done.
Right.
So it became a way that I was validated. I was unique. I finally got male approval, and it wasn't my father, but
Yeah,
it was.
totally. It must have been very scary for you to actually come and tell your father your plans and what you were going to do.
Well, again, I keep contradicting you. Sorry.
And that's okay. No,
Um,
it's your experience. Yeah, not mine.
Yeah. And
uh,
I'm curious. I don't know if you would be able to um answer this, but you said that that your father went into economics. I'm wondering, was that something that he truly had a passion for, or was that something that he just fell into? Because I would almost wonder, you know, because if I'm just putting myself in his place, like my child is following her passion, she's making a run at this. Maybe there's like a potential sense of jealousy. I don't know.
that's that is very interesting point, and it well could be part of his discomfort with it. It
Hmm.
was also me expressing interest in something he knew nothing about, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that threatened him.
Hmm.
Uh,
Mm,
and I do know, again, very perceptive point, that in undergrad at Duke, he was a political science major, but he went back to Duke and got a PhD in economics, which probably in part had to do with his anxiety about money.
Hmm.
mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, because Jeremy made a stab at thinking about like what the title of the book meant, and kind of where it came from. What made you choose the title of the book, Counter Melodies?
Well, it was difficult to come up with a title. The first title I came up with was Mentor, Tormentor, when
Mm,
Warren, Mr. Little, turned on me. And then these were comical, most of them. Trusting the wrong men, because that's really the story of my life. Um, but my husband was the person who came up with the title. The subtitle was my idea, but counter melodies in the sense of, and the cover even has a bit of a vine that is wrapping around the flute. So
Hmm.
it's something
mhm,
I want to do. And there's this current that is counter melody adorns a melody, but in my case, it chokes. It
Hmm.
goes against what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
So it was simply the title I ended up with. Now, the subtitle, which you probably don't want to get into because might bore your listeners, a memoir in sonata form, that was, excuse me, simply my means of organizing the story. Uh,
Hmm.
mm,
and it's because the two themes of my life through my 20s were that need for male approval and my struggle to become a musician.
Hmm.
So that's why the subtitle, and we don't need to go into that. Um, but yeah, the counter melodies is supposed to be intentionally a little bit vague, but
Hmm.
obviously about music, but there's something against it.
Hmm.
mm,
Yeah, and which I think is a perfect lead in to the transition I think you were just going to get to around how you had this fundamentally kind of place where you got the attention that you so much desired, but actually that becomes one of the most biggest injuries in your life as well,
mhm,
correct?
mhm,
Oh, yes, definitely. That's um, when this is about the origin of the book, the idea of writing
Mhm.
it. Uh, I started practicing yoga a little bit, maybe a year before I retired. And at the end of each lesson, the teacher would have us meditate. And at the end of that, he would say, I am grateful to my teacher. And I noticed and I would tense up every time he said that because I thought, I am not grateful to my teacher. And I think I had as much pent up turmoil about Warren Little as a lot of people have about one or both of their parents. And it was a physical reaction. Here I was very relaxed after a yoga session, and then I'm grateful to my teacher and I just tensed up. No, I'm not. So maybe it was yoga that made me
Mhm.
write the book.
Mhm.
So this is, if I can find it, a short passage that will show a little bit about why Mr. Little's betrayal was so difficult. Um, and forgive me, but it does have a bit of musical context. When I was in the Atlanta Symphony, my second year, we acquired a then very famous man, Robert Shaw, to be the conductor. And if there are older listeners, they may have heard of the Robert Shaw Chorale. Robert Shaw was also a very good orchestral conductor. And when he came to conduct the symphony I was in, he fired about a third of the orchestra. So not only was my teacher under stress, but I was under a lot of stress. So this describes a rehearsal where um, it's early in the week. Professional orchestras usually have 4 days of rehearsal and 3 days of performances.
And just making sure I got this right, that I'm tracking this right. At this point in time, your second chair.
I am sitting next
Yeah.
to him. He is literally 2 feet to my left
Mhm.
in the principal position.
Mhm.
And as second flute, yes, I had to blend with him and match his sound, but I was his colleague. I was not his underling,
Yeah.
other
Mm,
than he was principal, I was second, but I was a fellow professional, or should have been thought of
Mhm.
that way. So this is a rehearsal of the last movement of Mendelssohn's Italian Symphony, and it's a symphony. It's a movement that features lots of rapid passages for two flutes that were exposed. So therefore, Mr. Little, now Warren Little, and I were together in these passages. Um, right before the first exposed flute duet, Warren gestured with the end of his flute as if he were going to come in slightly early, a subtle but definitive movement that almost made me jump in too soon. The question I had repressed last year surfaced again. Is Warren trying to sabotage me? Years of trusting him made me dismiss the thought. Surely it had been an inadvertent move. Though rattled, I was eager to rehearse the lovely flute duet in the slow movement. But we had played only in 2 bars of it when Shaw, the conductor, stopped the orchestra. We need more second flute here, he said, looking straight at me. Both flutes are equally important. When we resumed and I played louder, Shaw rewarded me with one of his rare smiles. Now you're too loud, Warren hissed as soon as the duet was over. Can't you hear that? His harsh words felt like a punch in the gut. Should I acquiesce to the conductor or my former teacher? During the rest of the rehearsal, Warren glared at me several times. Was I too loud? After the rehearsal, I left in a hurry, eager to escape Warren's disapproving scowls. The next two rehearsals were better, and the beginning of the Mendelssohn at the first performance. But right before the last flute duet, Warren gestured with the end of his flute to get me to come in early. Instead of reacting, I came in precisely with him. The other performances were without incident, so perhaps I had imagined the whole thing. And I think that gets to one of the insidious aspects of gaslighting, which is
mm,
begin to think, at first it was a derogatory comment here and there, and then it um, builds up, but you have these moments that become more and more frequent where you say, am I hearing right? Is what's happening here? And the person who used to say you were a fine flutist is eventually saying you don't even belong in a professional orchestra.
Yeah, and like I can't imagine, what that would be like. Because I think on like just hooking it right back into the very beginning, because he was your surrogate attachment figure. Now that this surrogate attachment figure, the person that that I've learned to trust, that has really given me my identity, is now almost trying to strip it away. So it's laying bare all of these feelings of inadequacies that have been implanted in you from the very beginning. Am I wrong?
You must be a very good therapist. Absolutely, exactly right. And I had, kind of rediscovered during high school my self confidence that I had as a little girl. And I didn't know that it was so dependent on Warren. But yes, when he turned on me, it just called into question the whole basis of my confidence. And that might be a good lead in to the first suicide attempt, which I will not read the really disturbing parts.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the setting, which is peculiarly um, classical music, professional orchestra,
Mm-hmm.
is unusual, but the feelings are just, I think, kind of universal. So, sorry. Okay. Well, I thought I had. Okay. Sorry, folks. My little marker fell out.
Oh,
So
good.
this describes, Christmas is always a fraught time, I think, for
Mm-hmm.
anyone who has turmoil in their lives that goes back to childhood, family of origin uh, experiences each year at Christmas. One Friday evening in mid December, I struggled to focus on playing my part during a performance of Robert Shaw's lovely Christmas choral program. Most members of the orchestra had been delighted to replace the traditional Nutcracker with Shaw's inspired program of Christmas music featuring his extraordinary choir. But I barely made it through last night's performance without breaking down, and I still had the rest of tonight plus Sunday afternoon. And then it says, the walls of the hall closed in, squeezing me out. I couldn't stand seeing the happiness of others. I was the loner surrounded by groups, couples and families in the audience, singers together in the choir, friends in the orchestra, but not my friends. Warren had made it clear I didn't belong there. I was a fraud, a pretender. If not in the orchestra, where did I belong? Each note of the shepherd's farewell mocked me. The lush sounds of the strings playing a slow, tender melody reminded me of my first orchestra rehearsal years ago when I'd fallen in love with the sound of the strings. I'd wanted nothing more than to be part of that gorgeous sound. But tonight, that same beauty hurt. I wanted to run across the stage screaming that I didn't belong, that an imposter was playing the second flute part. I forced myself to play the rest of the program. As soon as the last note sounded, I slammed the flute into its case, rushed off the stage, and drove recklessly to my apartment, running a red light at 14th Street and edging the speedometer close to 100 on the freeway. Tempting fate, desperate to do something, anything, to avoid the incessant hours of Warren's ridicule. So my difficult times emotionally were always the worst around Christmas time. And it just happened later that I was raped on December 27th. So that was unfortunately, and intensified my struggles getting through Christmas and especially the month of January, which
Mhm,
is
Mm-hmm.
obviously the darkest month in terms of daylight.
mhm,
And it's always a struggle for me.
mhm. Yeah, and the intensity.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest things about humans is that we are all tribal people. We need to have a sense of a place in which we belong,
Yeah.
and to hear that the place in which you belong is also where your most significant tormentor was, would be a devastating thing for people.
Yeah, that is so true. And um, I in high school played in a community orchestra, so not a professional orchestra. And that gave me, again, a reinforced sense of identity, of belonging. And I think in high school, all your life, everyone wants to feel like they belong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I felt the most embraced and the most useful and purposeful was in the orchestra. But now it was the the Dickens best of time, worst of times. And musically, it was inspiring, but emotionally, it was devastating. And it robbed me of my solace, which had been taking comfort in music, both to express my feelings and also to get away from stressful situations. But the
Mhm.
aspect of feeling alienated, not belonging, yes, that was really key.
And I can almost imagine because, like, as an orchestra, like when you're playing together, you almost have to be in that flow state and be willing to connect with each other so that you can lead into each other. So I can almost imagine that there's like a sense of I'm needing to fight my nervous system because I need to be here, I need to be present, but then like you said, like it's almost like all of that was cranked up to 11, so it's almost like I need to force myself in there, but then I'm almost like running out as soon as I can because it's too much.
Yes, it was the actually even one specific piece that spoke to me um, so eloquently and expressively. And playing that piece in that context was it was like underscoring how much I had lost and
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
much something that had been a comfort hurt and was really destroying me.
Yeah, Ernestine, something that really jumps out at me as you describe this, um, within the literature for attachment theory, they actually steal a metaphor from music, and I think this is really useful to connect together. They call the connected experience between a youth and their parent. They call this attunement.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow,
Uh-huh.
that's that's really interesting.
Yeah, so if there's a lack of attunement between child and parent, then that child will develop a sense of insecurity. And when you're talking about the literal tune that you're taking
Mhm.
together as an orchestra, there has to be an attuned process. I
Mhm.
think that in my opinion, I'm not being a musician, but feeling the music at a concert, hearing all the rest of the crowd, you become one unit together, and if you felt like emotionally not attuned, how could you be attuned with them in the music? That would have been distressing for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's almost like being split apart. You know,
Mhm.
part of me wants to be in the flow of the music, and the other part of me wants to just get the heck out of there.
Mhm. Yeah. So I'm very curious where your narrative goes from here as well. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yes.
you set this perfectly in terms of the sense of disconnection that you would have, how that would drive you to a place in which you didn't feel like you fit anywhere, and even to the point in which you became suicidal. What does the story look like from here?
Well, eventually I got the nerve to take a year's leave of absence from the symphony. And after the suicide attempt, the thing that pulled me out of depression was that the young musicians, and I was, of course, very young then too, that the conductor Shaw had brought in, reached out to me and said, "You're not the problem. Warren is the problem." And
Wow.
um,
Mm,
they helped me see it more objectively.
mhm,
And
mhm,
uh, I even noticed that while the majority of Warren's scowls and grimaces and mutterings were for me, he also did the same thing for the person on the other side of him, the principal oboe, and the two very important people behind him, principal bassoon and principal clarinet, all of whom were much more my age than his. Um, so, in any case, I had the nerve to get a year away from the job, and it was a very hard decision to go back. But I think I was on a pretty good trajectory, except that the first year I was in Boston working towards a master's at New England Conservatory, I went to my parents' house at Christmas and
mhm.
was raped by the husband of a member of the orchestra, a good, not a good friend, but a friend of mine in the orchestra. And
Oh,
I was to meet them for dinner right after Christmas. And when I got there, she wasn't there, but I knew the husband somewhat, and um, it was just so much of, I think, turmoil is enhanced by
Mhm.
timing, unfortunate timing. And I think, just when I was beginning to escape the
mhm.
negative
Mhm.
effects of
Mhm.
Warren Little, I was raped. And this was the 70s, and it was always the woman's fault.
Mhm.
I was, uh, I mean, I wasn't young. I was, well, seems young now, 25, but I was very naive and I trusted this man. I'd
Mhm.
been to their house several times for dinner. He took me to a Japanese restaurant and introduced me to sake, which, as you probably know, is quite strong, but I didn't know that at the time. And it is possible that he even slipped something into the sake. I don't know that. But in any case, I got drunk, and that's what led to the rape, which, alas, got me pregnant. So
Oh.
it it was very, very tough. And just for your listeners, I'm going to say that because I had an abortion, I led the life I wanted to after the rape. But if I had been forced to carry that child when I was 25, had no means of income, and was, so um, driven to want to pursue music, I would have had to give it up. I am sure I would have definitely tried, maybe succeeded at suicide if I had been forced to carry that abortion. Sorry, very Freudian slip, to carry that pregnancy to term.
Mhm.
So I'm a poster child for abortion because I went on, earned a doctorate, got a job in a
Mhm.
good college, and feel very happy with my life.
Mhm.
Oh,
Mhm.
I'm sorry. This is totally off the subject, but I want to just correct one little thing. Um, the college where I taught is Lawrence University
Mhm.
in Appleton, Wisconsin, is not St. Lawrence on the
Oh,
East Coast, nor
gotcha.
is it the University of Kansas at Lawrence. So there are three. It's
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, clarity there. Thanks for the clarity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Wow, what a powerful process you just
Hmm.
described,
Absolutely.
um, and what a tremendous um, process of growth that would have required for you to get through it.
Yeah, yeah, and just digging in and finding like a sense of resiliency. Because like as I hear that, like I think for a lot of people, getting up and finding that foothold on that stable ground, that initial foothold can be so take such effort, and then for that to be pulled away again, um the fact that you're willing to like get up and that you made those decisions in that time, because I can imagine, even though at the time in the 70s where Roe versus Wade was in there, that even having to make that choice and saying, I am going to do this, that takes a lot of effort, because that's, I don't know what how that came about with your family or things like that, but that's definitely something to really take into account.
Hmm.
Yeah, I certainly never told my family. My mother had said more than once, if you ever get pregnant, come in this, don't come here because you will not be allowed into the house.
Oh.
So I talk about feeling alone. I really was
Hmm.
very alone.
Hmm.
Yeah, one of the things that really jumps out at me as we come to this part of the story is and wanting this focus in terms of just being cognizant of the time. What from here, I really want to understand, what did healing look like then? Because I think
Hmm.
that you are before us as this intact, whole human being who grew through these adversities, and I'm wondering how you did that.
It's through music. That had always been my go to um, salve and, comfort.
Hmm.
And one thing that I did get from my father is the drive towards a goal. And I think I was able to push it aside for a couple of years, but it caught up with me later when I was in grad school. And this was another poor uh, occurrence of the timing of things when the shame and guilt about the abortion uh, started bothering me. I went to the university counseling center and I was assigned a therapist um, who was not just unscrupulous, but manipulative. And he gradually convinced me that I would not get over my depression unless I talked about my transference to him. So the second suicide attempt was really the result of another person gaslighting me and saying, you're not going to get better and you're a bad patient because you're not talking about your feelings about me. This man later lost his license for sexually abusing his patients. So
Mm.
that was that was a very bad pairing.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that just speaks to the weight and the responsibility that that you and I, and then the roles that we
Yeah,
have, and
totally.
that people, if like you say, if they're unscrupulous, they can use this very important and key attachment relationship to injure other people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, if we had more time, we could go into the two therapists I had and how unhelpful they were. But I know we're about out of
Yeah.
time.
Well, and that's the other part. I want to make sure we give this part, the healing part,
Hmm.
it's fair showing, you know. So what was it that gave you the traction? What how did that fit into your story?
It it will sound like a non-answer, but again, it was music.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
Mhm.
the second suicide attempt was really dangerously um, close to successful. But when I came out of it, I had sort of an epiphany, and I knew I had to quit therapy. I knew I had to break up with a boyfriend who was a little bit denigrating, also. And I immersed myself once again into music, which was my
Mm.
path back to sanity. Uh,
Mhm.
and I wish I could say, well, I was just strong willed. I was just so passionate about music and I could throw myself into that. And
Mhm.
it certainly was not another therapist.
Mhm.
No.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to heal. We always have to point that out, right?
Oh, absolutely. And
Psychotherapy is only one of them.
absolutely. And like from like an internal family systems perspective and from a lot of other perspectives, we have all of these resources inside of ourselves, and sometimes you need like another person, like a therapist, to help you point out those. But for you, like I can really hear it was like going into that well meant going in musically, which that was how you were able to attach and attune to yourself, which was really something that was important because you were looking for these outside people to validate you. But it was really about how can I validate myself and be the person that I needed to be that other people weren't for me.
Yes. And I was lucky in that when I was a grad student at Wisconsin,
Mm-hmm.
we had a terrific orchestra conductor, and I played principal flute. And that was wonderful because he programmed a lot of the best flute pieces for flute solos. So
Mm.
it was very gratifying, and music really returned to being a comfort and at that time not really an escape but a means of getting back to feeling confident about myself.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Even in my own life, my son was in a bad accident that caused a post concussion, and he picked up a guitar, and I swear that guitar saved his life.
Yeah, that's absolutely parallel
Hmm.
story.
Hmm.
And it's
Like
hard.
the injury, of course, the path is different, but the fundamental connection that you find is the same. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. As I was sitting here, I, I honestly, I wish we had more time because I feel like there's so much more we could unpack here. Um, I'd like to, potentially welcome you back on the show if
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
if,
Yeah.
if it's
Sure.
possible, if we could do
Hmm.
a part two or
Yeah.
Oh,
other areas where you'd like to go because I think that we've like there's so much more here at the end that we've just begun to just
Yeah.
tap into. Um, with with that in mind, I'm curious for you, Jeremy. What's really stood out for you today?
Yeah, if it's okay, I'll answer that question. But first, I want to ask you, Ernestine, is there something that is sitting with you that you wanted to make sure that you had the chance to share and that you haven't had an opportunity to? Because if there is, I want to give you that space.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be very brief. Because I was um, a woman of my era, I
Mm-hmm.
thought of my rape as my stupidity. I had done something really stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where it came out was in the prison work that I was doing as a volunteer, there's always a day where two victims tell their stories, and one is a rape victim. And in the circle after this rape victim told her story, when it was my turn to respond, I said that I too had been raped. And until that
Mhm.
moment in a men's prison group, I
Mhm.
had never admitted or said to myself, "Yeah, this was a rape." So
Mhm.
that's that's a story for another day. But
Mhm.
it's pretty exceptional that it was
Mhm.
40 years after the
Yeah.
rape.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that is exceptional. The whole fact that you'd go and volunteer in a prison system is actually exceptional.
Mhm.
Well, I think the least of these are important, and I I'm very aware of social injustice. I think it's more pronounced in our country than in yours, though I
Mm.
probably shouldn't say that.
Mhm.
But people are very uh, dismissive about prisoners, and there's so much unfairness that determines who is imprisoned and how
Mhm.
long they're there and how they're treated once they get there.
Mhm.
And when I volunteered twice before that particular program where I admitted, and what should we have to use the word admitted?
Mhm.
Acknowledged that
Yeah.
I had been raped.
Mhm.
Uh, so it's a good program, and there are a lot of inmates that really want to turn their lives around.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I'll share one point and then I'll connect with your question, Trent. That is one of my, I have a cousin that is like 2 weeks older than me, and he has worked as a guard for a long time. And he often would say to other guards, he would see the way that they were managing a situation and the dehumanizing the people that they're working with. And he would say, if it weren't for just a couple things that went different in my life, then I'd be on the other side of the bars.
Mhm.
Oh, thank God for your cousin,
Mhm.
because prison staff make such a big difference. And of course, that there's a spectrum of behaviors of prison guards that
Mhm.
affects the inmates' ability to um, want to do something good with their life.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Trent, to answer your question, so the biggest thing that jumps out for me in this conversation is an understanding how a unattuned child in the context of attachment becomes very vulnerable to feeling alone through
Mhm.
your whole life, and finding that within self. The way that I would kind of summarize what I saw in my mind from what you described is that you found music, but then you found the music within you along the way.
That's a great way to put it. I
Mhm.
yes.
Mhm. And the one last thing, and that is, of course, um, there's multiple ways to heal, and I appreciate you sharing the fact that you found something that was a massive attachment in your life that fundamentally became a part of you, and no matter what happened in your life, you stayed connected to it.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. Um, Men let me down, but the flute never let me down.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Trent?
And like I think what you bring up is really key. One thing that really stood out to me, like as we were going through this whole conversation, and I think that it's something that is really poignant, like where you were telling your story, and you were like being honest with where you're at, but through the reflection, you're able to see the people that have come in and out of your life and those that have wronged you, and not only as people that have hurt you, but as flawed human beings themselves. And I think that that's something so very key, because a lot of times what happens is when we look at stories like this, we try to um, look at it from one angle, and that's not always the case. And true healing comes from inside, and seeing our own flaws and accepting the flaws of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Such a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And in considering the life of my teacher, the mentor, tormentor, I
Mm-hmm.
recognize that he was very complex and that, there are no villains that don't have other characteristics and
Mm-hmm.
other ways that they respond to other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the one thing we would ask, and that is, please send an email to us that has your links for social media, for website, for where people can get your book. I think there's a lot of people that would benefit from your story and your story of recovery.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I will do that. Easy
Yeah.
way is Amazon or
Yeah.
Barnes and Noble.
Yeah. But we'll put those links into the
Okay.
show notes so people can easily connect.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
on that note,
I'm Trent Akers.
and I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that this message has been as meaningful to you as it has been to us. If you're looking for help, you can find us on Facebook at Humanizing Mental Health.